Have you ever heard of that meme that the curtains are just blue? It floated around in the, I don't know, mid 2010s, rears its ugly head every few years. The whole intention there was basically that your English teacher really was making you do all of this really useless introspection, and that the artist, the author, the creator never intended for you to have any deeper reading or critical thought take place when evaluating their work. I'm going to say it now. I think there is maybe some truth to that, right? I don't think every creator considers all of the potential symbolism that could be connected to their works at that time, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean it's not there. It doesn't mean that the author never intended for anyone to read between the lines. And most importantly, to me, culture shapes symbolism. In 2012 to 2015, I was completing my undergraduate degree at CSU Chico in anthropology. While I was there, I also worked for the Miriam Library on campus. And we were really busy during the semesters. I pushed in so many chairs, filed books, microfiche, etc. There's this really cool memory of this choral group that would come and practice in between the library and the museum that was right across the hall. And as they would sing, their voices would echo up the glass all four stories of the library. And it was so cool. During the summers and holidays, though, the library was a ghost town. Faculty and staff would often chat with the student workers during those periods of time, right? And we kind of became acquainted. A couple of those librarians suggested to me that I should really look into librarianship. And at the time, I kind of blew it off. I already knew what I was going to do. I was going to go get my doctorate in anthropology. But summer after holiday after summer, I'd really kind of lost my love with academia, and still the librarians would say, hey, check library school out. Check it out just a little bit, though. In fact, I could probably credit librarians Irene and Kevin at CSU Chico for my looking into SJSU in the first place. I didn't immediately apply, right? I thought I'd go get experience, try things out before leaving one academic institution for another. And the goal was essentially, I'll take a gap year and figure things out. As most anthropology grads do, I didn't directly move into anthropology. I ended up in big tech, though. I was there for about a decade. During that time, I think I went through what I would consider two of the most controversial presidential elections of my lifetime. Granted, they were also probably the only ones that I really, at that time, had the wherewithal or at least the care to understand. And to be honest, I kind of forgot about going back to school for a while. And then COVID happened. Disinformation had already been insane. But as COVID just got bigger and bigger, the disinformation and the misinformation became unmanageable. The people who I knew and I loved, who were dismissing science and embracing these completely unfounded claims, was just insane. I started reading more information, right? I was looking into more news, more medical and science journals, and trying to find vetted, credible, trustworthy sources. People were just taking things at face value that felt very much to me like things that were never intended to be taken at face value. So circling back to that meme, the curtains are just blue. Were people not just curious? Did people just want information handed to them? No inquiry, no fact checking. We're just going to assume it's true. And I kept thinking about my parents telling me, just because it's on the TV or the internet doesn't make it true, right? And I guess people just never got that lecture, or maybe they forgot. Have you heard of the principle of least interest? It's basically this idea that an organism is going to choose the path of least resistance and use the least amount of energy to get something done. And so, especially when people are vulnerable, like during COVID, the principle of least interest has a little bit of a resurgence. In fact, one article suggests that behaviors suggested to prevent the spread of COVID, like masking, social distancing, vaccinations, etc., simply were not habitual enough to have been integrated into somebody's daily lives. And as such, people were just opting out for whatever the easiest option was. In other words, what took the less amount of energy. And, it sounds a lot to me like the principle of least interest. Unfortunately, there were consequences to this, right? And in this case, major ones. People got sick. They had really traumatic hospital stays, and in some cases, they died. Long COVID had a series of symptoms, still has a series of symptoms that are being looked into: mental health disorders, heart disorders, etc. I don't I don't think people were trying to maliciously hurt other people, but I do think there was a lack of interest or consideration of the factors and the consequences that heightened the severity of the event. So are we getting off track here? What about these blue curtains? It's never been about the blue curtains, right? It's about the idea that there's a deeper context. Educators are using that deeper context to teach students how to parse information and read between the lines and consider the possible consequences. And yes, it's a hard skill. It's a hard thing to learn how to do. And that's why we practice it from such a young age, right? Educators are using various frameworks, the AASL standards, Common Core standards, the ACRL frameworks, to make sure that they can prioritize critically seeking and evaluating information, teaching things like inquiry, collaboration, growth, contextualization, identification. It's all skills that encourage information literacy. So in 2023, there was this huge tech layoff. It hit a lot of the really big tech companies, and it happened to hit the one that I was with as well. And I ended up losing my job. I can't say I was like too concerned with this at the time. Tech had been taking a really weird turn. The increase of AI, the way things are being marketed, global politics, it all just started feeling really gross. Working from home during COVID, staring at the same walls, trying to desperately navigate a new reality where conspiracy theory was just wrapped up in everything and information overload was just unsurmountable. I started looking at other careers that just felt less icky, and I was losing my own ability to parse information and decipher facts. Eventually, I started working at a public health agency. It's actually where I'm currently at now. When I first started there, I had a manager who was like, "Hey, why didn't you ever get your master's?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, I don't know. I considered it, but I don't know if I'm cut out for it." I mean, it'd been 10 years since I'd even been on a college campus. And what if I couldn't remember how to write or cite information or synthesize things? Or I don't know, I just started talking to my friends and my family about it and how I had made friends with these librarians. And I kept getting emails from SJSU's iSchool every so often from back when I did my original investigation in 2015. Finally decided to research the practicality of going back to school. Here's the thing. Ever since I was a kid, I thought it'd be really cool if I could have super intelligence. That's the superpower that I wanted. I wanted to know everything off the top of my head. And as I got older, it sort of turned into a love of research and analytics and deciphering data. And of course, with my background in anthropology, I always wanted to understand how this came together with people, how they experience information, how they comprehend and communicate, how we share stories with one another, and how we interpret those into reality. I also love designing trainings. I love writing curricula. I love having conversations with people about the things that they're passionate about. And I finally was just like, I'm going to do it. And I pulled the trigger on going back to school. Now, as a prospective librarian, I don't suppose I'm going to end up in some radioactive incident that's going to land me with super intelligence, but I can learn how to know. And that, to me, is super important. I want to share that with others. I want to be a step in turning the tide on the blue curtains, to engage in literacy. I am inspired by all of the people who are fighting to bring innovative ideas and offer new educational angles to understanding things, using every educational technological advantage that they can to make learning more approachable. And I'm inspired by those who are helping to remove the elitist barriers of an educational system in order to allow anyone, anywhere, at any time to engage with information that they care about. Early on in my journey in my master's, I took information communities, as we all do at SJSU's iSchool program, and I really looked at mis, dis, and malinformation and how it continues to impact communities. The curtains are just blue came up a lot, especially with regards to the literacy crises and disinformation campaigns. It really got me thinking about how my educators shared information literacy with me throughout my educational career. And it always felt really incognito. I don't think anyone ever said to me, hey, this is what information literacy is, and this is how it's going to help you. I'm not even sure if I was aware of the phrase information literacy until I was at a 4-year university. Critical thinking, sure, but critical thinking to me never felt as well rounded or as encompassing as information literacy does. Information literacy is media literacy, it's critical thinking, synthesis, comprehension, pattern recognition, information retention, and so much more. The curtains, they're far more than just blue. And like, yeah, they're blue, but the why and the how and what is going on and how it will continue to shape symbolism. That's what's important. How history from 100 years ago is still relevant today. How legislation shapes society. How policy and influence can have consequence. How science fiction dystopian novels are a warning and not an exciting idea about new technological advancement. I want to meet people where they're at in a space where they are wanting to engage with the information. Whether it's a school assignment, a work requirement, or just a passive interest, I want to outright tell people at all ages that, hey, information literacy is something that you should take part in. It will help you for the rest of your life. No one is going to ever be able to avoid every false news story or fake news headline or AI crafted hallucinations or, whatever misinformed social media reshare, right? But people do have the ability to question sources, to understand the emotional and manipulative rhetoric of clickbait speeches or propaganda or whatever, just to become better informed. I'm an imperfect messenger, right? I've fallen for misinformation before. I've made errors and noticed and then been, I don't know, too lazy, I guess, to go back and correct it. No one's ever going to be able to avoid every informational wrongdoing. It's hard. It's a hard skill to learn, especially if you've never been an active participant. That practice takes effort, and I want to make that effort more appealing. When I started library school, I thought, I was going to do something that engaged with my current career the best, right? Knowledge management, information organization, or intermediation, whatever. The further I go into it, the more I lean toward academic librarianship. However, wherever I end up going in the information science field, whether it's an academic librarian, a fact checker, or a researcher, whatever it'll be, my goal will always be to make information more approachable and more equitable for everyone. Learning is a gift, and knowledge is a gift. And I want to be a librarian because I know why the curtains are more than just blue.